With that, let's start session 5, also known as one of the last sessions to collect ideas. Once again, as stated in the previous sessions, the end of the last sessions, then session 6 to 8 will be more centered on you thinking of ideas, connecting your what ideas have you collected into what you can make. So today's session 5 will be talking about the school, the class, and the person, rather the idea of the big community, the big space where learning, engagement, leading, and guidance is happening, all the way to the smaller senses of community, and then one person at a time are the individual. And in this case, I will be referring to both a student as a single person, the person who's learning, versus the person who is leading or teaching, the person being a teacher. I will try to bring up ideas of both of that, both of these kinds of people, both of the person types. All right. So with that, here's the first prompt. Individual meaning like one person, class, again being a smaller social group. That's how I see it anyway. Then there's the school, and then there's the larger education system, or for me, I interpret it as all the schools in a place that are like following a certain idea or a certain system together. Either that's one syllabus or one idea of how to teach. However, again, that's how I see it, and you are free to interpret it as you are. You don't even have to think of it as like Hong Kong education system. You can even think of like the shared system in like a single region or a single like neighborhood, I suppose. However way you think about it, the prompt I have is how would you arrange these words? For me, I have done it by like how many people there are, like one word here, one word here, one word here. That's just one example I have here. So how else would you like put the words or express these words? Um, so how would you think of them and how would you try to communicate them either with pictures or like with words like I'm trying to do right now or any other type of way you can express the idea. So think of how else you can arrange them and with what kinds. And again, this will be a prompt that will be put on the Padlet. Feel free to share the kind of expression you have the in whatever mode and method you like. I will have a moment of silence here just for people to brainstorm for a while. I also have some examples later on that are more picture based or shape based, visual. And again, if people want to share it in different modes or share your creativity, please feel free to share with the rest of the group. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video here. I'm just going to show the two examples I have. Um, Unfortunately, this is blocking, so okay, so let's see if I can move it here. For me, another way I can express it is by these big boxes, I suppose. See how I choose to do it with boxes rather than your circles. Um, so for me, I see it as like especially because the education system I see it is very like strict or rigid. So that's why I chose to use like big rectangles, big um like very line-based shapes that are very like strict or very rigid and like line here, straight line here, straight line here. That was one of the choice. That was the choice I had with choosing boxes. Education system, again, I saw it as a much bigger thing, so that's why this is the largest box that even goes further beyond like the space or the canvas of the PowerPoint slide here. And then there's a singular school, a class here. Um, and for me, maybe um, I did this as a simplified version, but in my head, I also see like multiple classes that are like stacked on top of each other that would probably look like a grid of like multiple uh classes put together. Um, but another way I wanted to show it just for simplification is just one class being put there and then one individual there. Um, preferably um I would do like a class as like a further grid and then one box only has like one teacher as an individual, and then everyone else would be a student. But again, this is just one way I would very simply express it. Another way I would express it with a different like mindset, I suppose, is or at least this is one I would how I would express it more liberally, more ideally, I guess. Because for me, this is how I currently imagine the like especially very Hong Kong based, like very exam based, some British curriculums as well, some like some US curriculums, some Western ones that are very like um very set on seeing results. This is another interpretation I have where you can see like individual class school, they are all the same size of triangle, and then the education system is just a much bigger space. Because for me, I see them all very interrelated if we're talking at a very personal level, like within one's own experience. For me, I see like one student as being a very like one person that can already affect or influence or even hold up how the entire class is. And eventually, because one individual, even if they're just a first year student, they inevitably will really affect how the entire school community is based on how much they want to do at school, how many people they want to talk to, and how many people they want to open up to. So that's why for me, I also wanted to express it like this, because at the very human level, at the emotional and the I guess personal level of me interacting with people one on one, or me having the teaching experiences, I see them all very interlinked. Um, and again, that's just one way I express it versus this, where it's very like me trying to look at it from an outside perspective, or I guess me trying to look at it at a very systematic and almost industrial like sense of it. Like again, I said very product based, looking for results. And this is why sometimes even when I was making this expression, uh, even with the choice of making rectangles, it kind of depressed me more versus doing this that felt that resonated with me more. So that was just me giving two examples that might hopefully influence you to just reflect on how you yourself think about the four words that I brought up: individual, either as a leader or a learner, and how you would view them in multiple ways, how you would express it in multiple ways. So if anyone wanted to share that with the group, please feel free to. I have just added my two visual ways into this group. Whenever you are done with that first prompt about imagining how you imagining how you would present or express the relation between all four words, I think then you'd be ready to move on to, I guess, a more sad or a question that still angers me, not necessarily because I have anyone to blame or because of any one person's actions. It's just that I did not know how else to phrase this kind of question other than who's to blame for not being included. So after you have thought about um how you would like how you understand the relation between these four like social groupings, including the one that's just one individual, the reason why I phrased it as this is because I didn't know how else to express like that anger or like the frustration that comes when people want to do more in their school or do more as a student, as a teacher, to make themselves known more, to let their needs be known, let their voice be heard. And I wanted to express that in the prompt, but I also wanted to think about how do I phrase it without putting like um without trying to make only one person seem like the bad person. So that is why I could only really phrase it like this. This was my best choice. So for example, if let's take it like for word, for example. Um, if you think that it is the person who has trouble to say their needs or they don't want to, maybe they don't want to say it to a teacher or say it to the like a go to the certain school office that's supposed to like do something for them, whether that's going to like the headmaster or the main person who's behind your academic exams or your syllabus, or if you do not go to like the school counselor or you don't seek help or you don't tell someone else, is that quote unquote your fault because you did not say that you needed something more? Or maybe you felt like you could not speak up within the small classroom. Like maybe you felt pressured by your classmates. Like maybe they did not bully you, or maybe they did not purposefully leave you out. It's just that you knew you did not belong there, and so you did not feel or you did not think you want to make your needs known there in that class when you feel like it was not going to happen anyway. Um, but if you also, or rather, if you instead blame the school that they did not plan ahead for your kinds of needs, if they did not do a certain action, if they did not prepare a certain kind of resource, is should your anger be to them, or should it then be their job to have known how to treat the need without you feeling really like scared or feeling like it's only your job as the one person to bring up this need or to tell the school that you need something else or you need something additional. And then there's the education system. Like, is it inherently the job of the school system or the people who have to plan out your syllabus, plan out your curriculum, plan out all these activities that all the schools have to follow to make sure this need is met? Like, is it their job to give all the resources to make sure every kind of need is met, including a need that is not well researched yet, or a need with the resource that maybe your region or your nation or even your continent does not have yet? Like, is the technology or the tools, like the physical material tools you have, just not accessible for you or not something that could be shipped over from a different country in time or made or developed in time or even brought up in your neighborhood or brought up in the society you're in? Is it the education system's fault for not providing all that at the start or not arguably not doing it fast enough? So that is why I could only come up with this way of expressing this prompt. While I have stated like some views of it, which are mostly kind of sort of personal, but were me trying to generalize the things I've researched and learned over my years in the Hong Kong-based teacher training program. Um, Once again, while it might have sounded like I gave multiple views of them, maybe you may not agree with any of them, or you may agree with some of them, or you think not one of them is fully true. However you think of this, this is not a prompt to give like a single answer to. This is why I also cannot give like a single answer from my own feelings. This is why I find it easier to try to argue for each case of like, is it the individual's blame or is it the school's blame? Why or why not? This is why I tried to give multiple small questions. You do not have to answer all of them. If you want to just focus on one of the words, like you just want to focus on class, go right ahead. If you want to go like a little bit of everything, go right ahead. Again, this is a prompt more for discussion, more so than it is for finding answers. It's more for thinking it through and like reflecting more on what you know now and what you might want to know later or what you want to learn more about, more so than it is about like saying this is for sure or it's this only. So because of how big this prompt is and because I've almost said everything, I will give a shorter silent time in between. So feel free to pause now, and I will continue to the next section much quicker. So once again, feel free to, um, well, I would prefer if you focus on, well, consider or like think briefly about each case, but you do not have to share your thoughts on all of them. And especially when you do the later activities, um, you do not have to, you don't have to force yourself to bring up all four of the terms or four of the like small social groups, but I bring all this up just so they're in the back of your mind. Okay, I'm about to go to the next section, and this section, this big prompt is I'm going to connect it very much so with the next prompt here, which is consider inclusivity in different contexts. And with this case, even though we have a focus of like teacher training in Hong Kong, for this prompt, I'm not saying anything about Hong Kong specifically. In fact, I have two examples here, and one is very much not set in Hong Kong in and of itself. So one example that I'm going to give you for this prompt is about considering inclusivity in like different situations of who's leading and who's learning and learning what and why are you learning a certain thing. So I'm going to give two examples just to give a demonstration of how you can think about inclusivity in different contexts, especially at the individual class, like small social group, the school, and then the education system setting. So my first example is one-on-one tutoring with me studying in Hong Kong and then doing a weekend tutoring with someone back in Myanmar. So across countries, across time zones, and across like codes, I would say, because the way I try to speak and model English for that student is somewhere in between the quote unquote native or the first language speaker type and where they are with like learning it as a foreign language, learning as a third, fourth language at this point for them, and me trying to use a code that's somewhat in the middle where I use a much slower speaking style and I enunciate all my words very much so. And I would purposefully try to use some easier words that I might not use in teaching someone else of that same age or teaching someone else in a school setting where I don't have to use many school-based words. Like you can see, I chose school-based words instead of academic because for me, within that tutoring session, I felt like it would be better to like use simpler words just so that they focus more on listening without reading support. And keep in mind that this is all during Zoom and it's just a one-on-one situation. So I have more, so I have a very tech-based limitation, but I also have more freedom in like how slowly I can teach or how much can I explain something. So already you can imagine that like the way inclusivity is and then the way I can meet their needs is going to be very different from the next example. Example, like back at JCYN at that New Territories Band 3 Hong Kong school where I am trying to meet the needs of 30 students, or at least I try to make it my point to meet the language needs of all the 30 students. But I also had the support of six very experienced English Form 1 teachers who they know the Hong Kong education system very well. They know how the syllabus goes, and they have more experience in meeting the various needs, or in their case, choosing how to meet everyone's needs or meet the most people's needs in the most time efficient way possible, especially when the education system and the school itself was asking for a lot more English class activities beyond the textbook that a lot of students were already struggling to keep up with. So, yeah, you can already imagine the sense of inclusivity and how to go about inclusivity is going to be different in these different contexts. For me, I'm going to give an example of how to break that down in a generalized way, which is through like the idea of interaction. Like, how are you talking with your student slash students? In my one-on-one tutoring, it's one-on-one. I have more time to cater to this one person's specific needs. I have more time to concentrate on that one person, listen to that one person, look at only one person's facial expressions and listen for their pauses, figure out how long are their pauses in between the more immediate speaking without planning beforehand, like trying to do conversational speaking without have having time to think of more words or having to rely on me to give them a hint on how to do more words. So already because of the interaction and because of how much time I'm able to dedicate to only one person, I have the chance to cater to only one person's needs. I can look at all the different kinds of needs, like social, language-based, maybe vocabulary, and within the language-based, maybe it's vocabulary or um, communication strategies of like how long do they need to wait or how long like do they need to like check their own translation, check their own speaking. But I also have this secluded sense because I have the chance to work with them directly. It is kind of sort of not, I wouldn't say fake or artificial. It's just that it's a very unique case of working with an individual. It's not only a conversation where I'm trying to understand what they mean or listen to what they say. I also have to listen to what they say and then try to like add in grammar help, add in extra vocabulary to like inspire them to think of other vocabulary they might know, but just forgot while they were focusing on speaking. So it's secluded. It is like not really authentic speaking or authentic interaction. or not fully real teaching, but not fully real like conversations. It is secluded, it is meeting your needs, but it does not mean that I know how to translate like need meeting from that tutoring session into the real world. I cannot train them into like figuring out how to identify their personal needs of like maybe translating things in their head or figuring out how to think of more English words or how to remind themselves of using like present tense in the right way or pronouncing a certain word very clearly. I cannot really translate that from like a not fully real English conversation into using that kind of need meeting or signaling what their needs are in the real world. So yeah, that was me trying to break it down by like interaction of the situation of the context and then sense of inclusion. But you can already tell that with those two words they already have such general meaning. And so I had a lot more to say, even just by those two words of how to break down the levels of inclusivity or the situation of inclusivity in a context. And so already when if you were listening slash reading the captions of how I would break down inclusivity in the tutoring example, you can already tell the differences in the large class teaching back in SKH JCYN, fake name. Because the interaction level is basically one, not the very experienced English teacher working with 30 students and having to figure out how to interact with all of them while not like particularly ignoring the other, but not spending too much time on only one person. The sense of inclusion is therefore not going to be easy. It's not easy for me to then go up to each student and go, okay, so I can tell that your main language is Cantonese and you feel anxious to speak in any language anyway, how can I build up your confidence? And then having to go to the next person and go, okay, so you're very confident in your English, but it's very informal English and it's not the kind of like proper school-based language that the teachers want to see you write. No, you cannot write this phrase that I know you learned from American television into this essay that people are going to see posted on the school board. I gotta help you like figure out which sentences are nicer for the whole school to read. It's not going to be easy to meet every single person's language needs, let alone the personal needs of are you overwhelmed in this classroom environment? How can I make it easier for you? Or that maybe I can tell that it's hard for you to listen to me all the way to the back of the room, but the microphone speaker is just really loud even for me. How do I fix that? So while I cannot cater to everyone's needs in the same way that I would do in tutoring, at least it's more authentic or more real world based when I am teaching an entire class. They are integrated already. They are connected already in a real social group called the classroom. They already have some experience of figuring out how to work alongside the whole classroom of 30 other teenagers, pre-teenagers maybe, or maybe they have found out how to cope socially or cope academically, like figuring out how to live in this Cantonese medium school, and then all of a sudden having a fully English class where even the teacher is not really able to translate anything to Cantonese or Mandarin or any other language if they're even allowed to, but at least they have their real sense of social inclusion or their way of figuring out how to be integrated into the social group, how to make sure that they have a place in the social group, even if they are not really seen as the full person that they are, or that they feel uncomfortable with some of their needs being met, not only like academic based. And for me, especially, I noticed a lot of them already had their own friend groups. So they figured out how to have social needs and academic needs within that small group itself. So they might have a sense of inclusion within that friend group based on who are they sitting next to, or that person like two, three desks away that they know how to like somewhat shout out to and ask for the answers, or how to shout to the whole class and then ask for a translation back in from English to Cantonese, or in my case, English to Mandarin that almost everyone can kind of understand. So once again, different contexts, different situations of interaction, and then sense of inclusion. And especially in my case, within the sense of inclusion concept, I am able to evaluate or like reflect on how everyone like copes with it or how everyone can navigate it and how each teacher slash leader has to go about it with the other individual as an individual learner who may or may not be in a whole class full of other individual people who have their own complex set of needs that might not have their needs mix in the same way as the next person. Like again, I had the example of one person who doesn't really want to speak up in any language versus someone who might be fluent in all three languages, but then might want to speak more, but then has this different set of situations. But then again, those are just two examples of how to evaluate and how to reflect on inclusivity in different contexts. Feel free to use the two concepts I have of like interaction and sense of inclusion. You can also come up with any two concepts that you'd like. I just put them there as reminders. So I'm going to give a long pause in the middle of the video here. So just so it's easier to see that this section is different from the next sections. And again, you can express this in any way. You can upload your discussion to the group in any way, whether you want to record a video or just type out your text, or maybe you have a different idea altogether of like how to express it visually, like audio, visual, maybe through a different like online file type that I might not have figured out yet. So once again, think of any context, does not have to be Hong Kong based at all, and just consider how inclusivity goes about how it was like in a different situation for you. And again, you could be the learner or the student in that case. So maybe you were the teacher in both cases, or maybe you were just guiding even by accident. So think of the different ways in which inclusion can be done, or the ways you went about that inclusion. Okay, I'm going to go to the next section. It's, I think this is the last one. Oh, okay. So before that section, I just brought up the slides from some past sessions. This one especially is from session 2. This one was about obstacles that might block you, both as a learner, an educator, leader, learner, student, teacher. Like, what were the obstacles that like stopped you from having your needs met as how you need it, or stopped you from being able to do what you did? What needs were not met and therefore like blocked you from doing things, or even blocked you from just doing them as well or as quickly or as comfortably as your other colleagues, your other classmates. So you can think back to some of those. For me, it was like space, autonomy to be able to like relate myself to an assignment, relate myself to like a job I had to do, like figuring out how much space I had to make an activity work for my students and for myself. This one, I believe, was from session 3. And this was about making the environment like one that works out for the student and the teacher, the leader and the learner, that can include someone, and the ways that make the space, the environment inclusive for everyone have to be done consistently, or to be done almost every day, or just at a good pace where it was not, where it was clear that the inclusion doesn't only happen on this special day or only can be done just because you were forced to do it. It's something that you are able to do, something that's within your, that you, the thing that's not too hard to do, or rather something that is okay to do for you almost every day. And I remember that big question there, like what needs to be done? Like what are the actions that can be done every day, and what needs to happen so that you can do those actions every day? Like what kind of resources do you need? How much time? Or like what do your colleagues as a leader, or what do your classmates as a student need to also do in terms of like social inclusion, or like how the characters are. So you can also think back on that. You can feel free to go back to your notes or just rewatch the session recordings from there, um, as well as the obstacles. I feel like those are quite related, but that's just me. And now I come to like deeper evaluation, like really connecting as many thoughts from session 5, this session, and the past sessions 1 to 4. How can everyone, individual student, individual teacher, and the class and school and the education system, what does everyone have to do? What does everyone have to like chip in, or what little things can everyone do to make sure that the whole environment is inclusive? How does a school and individual teachers, individual students help the education system of the whole place to become more inclusive? How does the school itself make the classroom someplace better for all the students, and like makes the obstacles not as hard to get by, or maybe takes away the obstacles if ideally, I suppose, if that's something that they are able to do? How can the school help each individual student or each individual teacher become someone that's included, and therefore be able to, the school able to help the individual be more inclusive and be more accepting of everyone else? How does a class affect an education system? How does a school affect an individual? Back and forth and back, small to big, big to small. What are your thoughts on this? Or rather specifically, what are the connections you can make? I am doing my best to not input my opinions in this. I just try to do the thing where I give certain like smaller questions to follow up of this much bigger question of how does everyone help to make the conducive environment? Because this is the last section, I'm not going to have a pause in here. like I have done with other sessions, all the prompts, the screenshots for it, and some textual additional sentences will also be on each post. So with that, that's the end of the recorded session. And once again, just a brief reminder that session 6 to 8 will be more based on you planning out what you can do. We were basically going through what has happened in the past for you or what is happening in the present for you. Session 6 to 8 will be more about your future or what steps, small steps, you are able to do for your future. I've put here self-learning, sharing resources, etc. Another big point of this project and therefore this workshop group is that when everyone feels comfortable, you can share maybe an experience that you want other people to like relate to, or maybe just think about, or just see how you would go about it differently. I also said self-learning because I understand that when you are going through all these sessions on your own time, you are going through your own thinking. And if you would prefer to just keep it to yourself, I fully respect that. And I can fully relate on how you need to, one person may need to take a long time to process all the thoughts by yourself. So again, this is why I try to make it not needed to share all your thoughts from these sessions. I've just asked that the final presentations, after you feel comfortable with what is your final one or your final demonstration, that you just share that in the group. And that's the most or the least, the minimum that I will ask for everyone to share with the whole group of itself. And again, 6 to 8 will basically be set in how to plan and prepare for presentations, or at least my suggestions on how to think about it, like what teaching practices have you known, or what can we share as a group? Or if you're just watching the sessions, what Will recommends and what Will might inspire you to go research on your own. The last thing is just about the Padlet, Google Drive, OneDrive. As of now, I haven't gotten that much response about how to improve this. While I don't know if this means I'm doing it well, I also can't tell entirely if silence means approval or silence means yes. Have you ever heard that joke that only no means no? Um, Joke aside, I am still taking feedback at any point. The surveys, like the Google form, is not the only way you can do it. Feel free to do it by any comment or contacting me directly if you don't want it on a public platform. But again, all these sessions and the resources, I will do my best to make as accessible to everyone through the Padlet. And again, the Padlet is just what I found works out nicely. But again, I am open to suggestions of different platforms, different methods, and so on. So that's it for session 5. Feel free to visit the videos back anytime. Feel free to look through the prompts anytime, and you don't have to answer all of them, but I hope that you have considered them in the back of your mind. So thank you so much for going through 5 whole sessions of this like self-learning online learning. And I understand that they are big questions. I mean, even the second one that I was very hesitant about, you basically have thought of that. So already, that's a big thing. Very big question, very angering question for me. So congratulations on getting to so many of these questions. And I hope that all my examples and like demonstrations of how I think through these questions about pedagogy and inclusivity, I hope they really have helped you understand or at least recognize how you would go about the Hong Kong system, or how you have already went through the Hong Kong education system and how you plan to go forward. So thank you again. I will end this slide just so it looks nicer. So thank you again for your time, and I will see you in the next stage of this project. Take care and goodbye.